Hello friends, there is an invisible barrier that has taken control of a small part of the Earth. This means that no one can enter it or leave it, and if anyone tries to break this barrier, their situation will become like this. Now in this situation, it is obvious that people inside the barrier will have a primitive lifestyle because they will not have access to proper technology, and the outside world will continue to advance with the help of technology. This means that the difference between the people inside and outside this invisible barrier will become apparent. Now I know you might be thinking that Dove is talking about an unreal concept that has no connection to reality, but let me tell you the reality of an invisible barrier that separates these two islands in Indonesia. I'm not kidding. Just take a look at this map and you can clearly see that despite being only 35 kilometers apart, the animals on these islands seem very different from each other. Now it is understandable for terrestrial animals that they cannot travel through the water in between. But the surprising thing is that even the birds and aquatic animals here cannot cross this invisible barrier. So these two islands are like two separate worlds which are separated by this unseen barrier. Well, Mr. Wallace is a very interesting character who will reach the level of Charles Darwin. Wells was born on January 8, 1823 in Wales, England in a poor household. So from childhood his only goal was to educate himself and create a separate identity in the crowd of millions and improve the situation of his family. But due to lack of money, at the age of 6 he had to leave his studies. But this incident did not deter his determination, and to fulfill his goal he made use of his home library. Sahara took support now because Walrus's father used to travel to different places to create maps of those places, and he was also a skilled gardener. Because of this, their library had many maps and gardening books, which gave a different perspective on nature and biology. They started taking interest in natural history and how things evolve in nature. But due to financial conditions, they had to ignore their interests. They decided to join their mother in their brother and father's land surveying business. But they didn't know that this decision would help them discover an invisible barrier. As their situation improved, suddenly their brother passed away, and their established family business collapsed. In this difficult time, they met Henry Waterbeet, who was an entomologist. In simple language, he was an expert in insects. In this meeting, they introduced the Ballers to their new skill, which led to the creation of a flower time business. They saw that they were earning good money in the Victorian society by raising rare species of animals and insects. And if they were involved in this business, Walrus's financial condition would improve, and they would also have a name in the biological world. That's why in 1848, both Ballers and Beads started collecting rare specimens by going to Brazil. After collecting specimens continuously for 4 years in Brazil, when they returned home, they were very happy. However, they were surprised to find a rare token that no one had found until then. In other words, they were now recognized by everyone. But their happiness did not last long because during their return, sadly, all their specimens were lost during their shift. Their dream of becoming famous became just a dream. Well, now it may seem like a misfortune, but this is where their story begins. The story of finding the invisible barrier, so that same you. After this incident, he made a proper planning. On April 18, 1954, he left England for his second expedition to Indonesian islands. He reached Archipelago and set off. In this expedition, his first stop was Singapore, from where he went ahead to Sulawesi, a small island in Indonesia. But their ship sank near Sulawesi and they had to go to the nearby island of Bali instead. When they reached Bali, they found the place interesting, and they started their survey and started collecting specimens of plants and animals. They studied the plants and animals in detail and noted their variety and diversity. Majorly, they saw animal species like tigers, rhinos, elephants, and birds like woodpeckers and parrots. They even collected some rare species. After collecting specimens, they continued their journey and went to the island of Lombok, just 35 kilometers away from Bali. But they were shocked to find that they had traveled thousands of kilometers away from Bali through a portal. Because although geographically, Lombok was only 35 kilometers away from Bali, but there was a huge difference between the animals living on these islands. In this new island of Lombok, they found animals like monitor lizards, kangaroos, and platypus, and colorful bird species like birds of paradise. Seeing the variety in terrestrial animals made some logical sense to them, because both Bali and Lombok are islands, but the diversity of bird species did not have any logical explanation for them. They realized that Like an invisible, limitless spiritual energy, this line is rocking with full force, crossing over both islands' organizers. They named this line D-Wall, but unfortunately, before they could bring their new discovery to the world, they got infected with malaria. And this malaria turned out to be a blessing in disguise for them, as it gave them plenty of free time to sleep in the beds rented by the ballers with their wall line. Taking advantage of this, they created a hypothesis without any high-tech equipment that could almost explain the fallow line. According to them, this imaginary line is within the geographical boundary formation of the Earth. The geography of the Earth has evolved due to some geological events, and that is why we can see this boundary today. At this moment, they realized that all the animals that meet in Bali, like tigers, rhinos, and elephants, are found in Asia, while the animals found in Lombok, like monitor lizards, kangaroos, and platypus, are all found in Australia. Based on this line of reasoning, they created a theory in which they explained that Bali was connected to Asia 360 million years ago, and Ireland was connected to Australia. That is why animals from Asia could easily travel to Bali, and animals from Australia could easily travel to Lombok. But as their journey continued, the low-lying areas between these islands started to fill with water, and the animals were stuck in a balance. They noticed that the birds that go to both islands are non-migratory. The problem with these non-migratory birds is that their bodies are not adaptable for long-distance flights because, unlike migratory birds, they cannot conserve their energy during flight. As a result, they can only find food in one place. We cover a distance of kilometers, and as I mentioned earlier, the distance between these two islands is 35 kilometers, which is impossible for them to travel. Now, as for the beings living in the water, they sought the help of Deep Shikaran to solve their mystery. According to Deep Shikaran, there are strong deep seekers in this region that prevent these animals from traveling. The force is so strong that it prevents these inequality animals from traveling. So the reason for the separation of these two islands was to be part of two different continents, and the reason for the separation of birds was their non-migratory nature, and the separation of animals was due to deep currents. Now, if we look at their explanation, it was quite logical, but due to the lack of scientific backing, the scientific community rejected their theory. After this, what happened with them was also difficult for me to digest. Look at this. This is a letter written by Charles Darwin in 1866, in which he appreciates the work of Wallace, because in 1858, he sent him his findings from Indonesia, which were clearly written in his book, The Origin of Species. But as you can see, this book does not even mention the story of Wallace. In fact, Wallace gave the concept of evolution during his research, which states that every species evolves from its previous species, and then he explained it further by using his partner's career, thinking that Darwin would appreciate him. But now, Darwin betrayed him by doing the same thing. Derived from the concept, he published his famous theory of evolution and became the father of evolutionary biology. He registered his book under his name, but how did he manage to do it when he was financially struggling? Because his theory, which proved the hypothesis played a role in plate tectonics, was proven 50 years after his death. Today, we believe that plates move due to plate tectonics and their activity, but at that time no one believed it. The meaning of plate tectonics in simple terms is the motion of layers of meaning that have been moving since the formation of the Earth. After the discovery of plate tectonics, it was first connected to the Bali-Australia series and the hypothesis series, and it was proven that Bali and Lombok had separated after the creation of a fast, deep-sea connection current that causes water to reach the lava inside the crust. Now, when this water comes up as steam, it pushes the crust and creates a space for the lava to come out. And now, when hot lava comes into contact with cold water, it creates a deep-sea connection, which forms a wall of temperature between the two sides of the water, creating a favorable environment for aquatic animals. Let's understand this with an example. Suppose you are in an ocean with a temperature of minus 200 degrees Celsius, and in front of you there is a cold, hot current. When the water temperature drops drastically, you will not find any tire in it, and in a way, it creates a wide create for the feasibility of life. Unfortunately, if plate tectonics had been discovered earlier, there would be 1.25 lock plant species, 1,500 insect species, and 2 promising theories that would not have died today. And friends, I think this is actually a big disadvantage for scientists because many times their discoveries are groundbreaking according to the time, but they do not get credit at that time. No one believes in the theory without any supporting facts. But after a few years, it is proven that what they said so many years ago is actually correct. But by then, the scientist is no longer alive, and they never receive rewards. This happened with the Nobel Prize-deserving Indian scientist Dr. Narendra Singh, whose credit was taken by a Chinese scientist. Basically, today, as you are using the internet, Mr. Kapani should be given credit for it. To know more and subscribe to this channel, which will satisfy your curiosity and keep you going for the next time. Learn and keep going.